yet irresistible. A burning urge that has propelled man forward since the beginning of time. A relentless pursuit that has produced the greatest achievements in history. Perfection. The quest continues at Nakamichi. Our total dedication to this goal has enabled us to succeed where others have failed, to create innovative products that others would not have attempted.
The Nakamichi Dragon, one of the most famous cassette decks ever. The Nakamichi 1000 DAT deck. The Nakamichi 1000 MB Music Bank CD player, and the Nakamichi 1000p digital audio converter. We're covering them all, so let's get started. If you haven't already, please subscribe. First, I'm going to talk about my Nakamichi Dragon. Nakamichi is such an iconic brand name when it comes to cassette decks. And the Dragon is a wonderful example of the products they produced back in the 70s and 80s. It's just an amazing cassette deck. And I'm going to go over that with you, the functionality of it, the restoration of it, the testing of it, the whole 9 yards. So that's going to be up first. Then I'm going to go over my Nakamichi digital products with you, which they're not as well known as their cassette decks were, but these things are just built amazingly well. You just would not believe the way they're built, and they operated wonderfully. Their main issue was they were extremely expensive back in the day. Not that a Dragon wasn't, or their other products, but these were extremely expensive and they sold very few of them. And it was basically these three Nakamichi digital products I'm going to show you was basically Nakamichi's tombstone. These three digital pieces along with the Dragon I thought would make a really interesting video. And so first, I'm going to start out with the Dragon. And as I said, I've had this several years. I've worked on it. I'm going to show you the restoration of it. And I'm going to show you the testing of it. It's just an amazing cassette deck. It really is. It's another one of those pieces I have in my collection. It'd be hard to give it up. There's three things about the Dragon that I think are unique. The first thing is it was manufactured for 11 years, from 1982 to 1993. That's quite a run for electronics. That's quite a run for any product, 11 years. And second of all, this unit in 1982 cost $2,500. Wow. I know I couldn't afford one. You know, it's amazing how expensive these decks were. And lastly is a feature it has, which is the Nakamichi Auto Azimuth correction system. And it pretty much is a system that will play back any tape optimally. All decks are a little bit different, all cassettes are a little bit different, and usually a cassette that's been recorded will play back the best in a deck it was recorded on. Where this unit here is probably the best cassette deck ever to play back multiple cassettes. Doesn't matter if it was pre-recorded, recorded on another unit, or what have you. It's really a tremendous playback performer. So that's a very unique feature. It did not have automatic recording bias, which some decks did have back then. You'd put a cassette in, it'd do a quick test, and set itself up automatically for you. The Dragon didn't do that. You had to do it manually for record. But for playback, it was all automatic. I just wanted to go through a few things about the Dragon before I got into the restoration of it. I enjoy looking over the history of the audio companies, of the equipment that I use. I find it very interesting to go back and see who started the company, who was involved in the design and the production of the units that I own, and also, even in this gentleman's case, he created the logo for Nakamichi. But they were into a lot of different products for many years, but as most of you know Nakamichi, you know them for cassette decks, and they produced several iconic cassette decks starting in the early 1970s. There's so many different ones that the ones I'm showing are just a small example of the ones that Nakamichi produced. I included here one that was a portable stereo recorder, which was pretty state-of-the-art back in its day in 1977. And of course, here's a unit that I've never even seen except on the internet that was produced in 1981, the 1000 ZXL. It just looks amazing. I'd love to see one other than on the internet, but I know I couldn't have afforded one back in 1981. But and here's the Dragon. That's another iconic unit, of course, for Nakamichi. Probably their best known cassette deck ever produced. It was their first bi-directional deck, and of course it has that automatic Azimuth correction system, which is very unique. And they were still building cassette decks into the 80s. And here's another one from 86, the CR7, which was a great cassette deck in its own right. But the times were changing, and by 1988 Nakamichi was getting into the digital products. This is an actual Nakamichi video that was produced on VCR tape for the 1000p, the 1000 MB, and the 1000 DAT deck that you're going to see later on in this video that I own. They had started to produce digital products because the times were changing and cassettes were going away, and it was time to get on board with the latest technology. And owning these products, I can tell you, they're incredible. I don't ever remember seeing them back in the 80s when I was going to stereo shops. Had a shop that carried anything like this. This was the time when Best Buy and Circuit City were coming to town, and a lot of little stereo shops were closing, and you weren't going to buy this at Best Buy or Circuit City. These 3 units cost right around $11,000 in 1988. Pretty incredible, right? A lot of money. So what happened? I really don't know. I mean, Nakamichi designed this in-house. This wasn't one of those deals where they didn't have any expertise, that nobody knew nothing about digital equipment. All they knew was cassette-based stuff. No, they developed this in-house. So they obviously had the engineering talent to get involved with the digital market, but somehow it just didn't happen for them. After the analog cassettes went away, Nakamichi for the most part went away. So really what happened with them, I don't know, but I'm going to talk more about my digital Nakamichi products later on. But right now I'm going to get back to that Dragon and go ahead and show you the restoration of that. This deck's in pretty good cosmetic shape, if not perfect. There's a few nicks on it, but it's not in bad shape. All the buttons are there, and it really doesn't look too bad. Like any equipment I receive, I take a look at it first before powering it up. In this case, I've taken the top cover off just to take a look. It's just a good idea, just in case there's something you can see that, would prevent you from powering up. In this case, it looked fine. First thing you do with any tape deck, doesn't matter if it's a Nakamichi Dragon or an open reel deck or any type of a tape deck, you clean the tape path first. Many times they haven't been cleaned for years, and you need to do that first before you do anything else. I've powered up the Nakamichi Dragon, and I'll do some basic testing just to see what's working and what isn't working before I start to work on the unit. In this case, I just did some basic play, record, fast forward, reverse. Seemed to respond well. So what I'm going to be doing in this deck, like so many tape decks, they need new belts along with an idler tire in this unit. So I've removed the faceplate to start to disassemble it. As I said, almost all tape decks have not had the belts replaced. So this Nakamichi Dragon, it's 30, 35 years old. Like any old rubber, it's time for it to be replaced. I'll have to get the transport out to change the belts on the idler tire. There's a number of tie wraps to cut, along with cables and screws to remove, just like in any cassette deck. You need to loosen some of the circuit boards from the bottom so that you can remove the transport. I've gotten the transport out of the chassis, and in this unit's case, you're able to sit the transport still attached to the unit on its side, the chassis on its side, and I have the transport sitting out on the table. Like any cassette deck, there's a lot of small parts, so be aware when you start to take the transport apart. There are many small parts, and if you're not familiar with these, you don't even know they have small parts. There's very small washers. Some of them are nylon colored. You don't even know that you've lost one when you have. They're very important. Each of those little pieces are actually important in a cassette deck for it to operate properly. I just want to stop here for a second, and I'll get back into this Dragon's restoration. But this is a Nakamichi Dragon. It's a cassette deck that not many people have, and most of you watching out there probably don't own one, but also most of you out there probably do own some sort of a tape unit, whether it's a cassette deck, an open reel deck, maybe you own both. And a lot of these techniques that are in this video can be carried over into any other cassette deck. Whether you own an Akai or a TAC or a Sony, same with open reel. There's a lot of similarities between cassette and open reel decks, and a lot of this stuff carries over. So I want to give as much information as I can to help you repair your particular tape deck. I feel that working on vintage tape decks is the most difficult piece of equipment that you can work on when it comes to vintage audio. I'm a hobbyist. I learned this on my own, and probably a lot of you guys out there are the same. You're hobbyists also, and maybe you're thinking, well, can I work on a reel-to-reel tape deck, or can I work on another piece of equipment? So I try to bring that part of my experience, not as a professional. I wasn't trained by TAC or Akai or Nakamichi or whoever, that I'm probably talking to a lot of people like me who would like to work on this equipment or would like to know more about it. And I can tell you from my standpoint, the tape decks have been the most difficult, and the open reels as difficult as the cassettes for me, because what you have, in addition to the electronic issues that any piece of equipment has that's 40 or 50 years old, you also have the mechanical aspect of it. Right? How many of these decks have you seen where the pinch rollers won't go up and hold the tape tight, or something else is gummed up, something just will not, the tape won't engage, you can't even move you hit the lever and it just sits there. It's almost always old grease. Has something to do with old grease. Think you've still got 50-year-old grease in your car. You basically got glue, and that's what you have with these. This wouldn't be the first item that I would work on. And I'm just telling you from experience. But if you do take this on, understand that you're going to have a number of issues you would have in any other piece of electronics, plus you're going to have that mechanical aspect of it, where you're going to have to take off a lot of fasteners, you're going to have to clean up a lot of grease, you're going to have to watch out for flying, E-clips and C-clips, and it's going to be a handful. I'm just saying from somebody who's gone through it. But if you work in an area where if something does fall, you can find it. So if you've got it out on the test bench and all of a sudden you undo something and you hear something tingle down through it and you end up finding something, you've at least got a chance to get it back together correctly. Because as I said, if you lose any of these small parts, there's a very good chance the Nakamichi Dragon's not going to work properly if you don't put them back in. I've got the Dragon's transport laying on its face, and I can start to remove the assemblies. Once again, I keep talking about parts, but it's very important. When you start to remove screws out of this unit, you're going to see some aren't the same length. Again, if you work on these all the time, it's not a big deal. You can put them on the table or throw them in a cup, but if all of a sudden you start pulling stuff off here, then you realize, holy smokes, where do these go? Why is this one a little longer or shorter than the other screw? And again, it's important to get it back together correctly. So go slow and make sure you know what you're taking apart. I'm going to have to remove some clips so I can get deeper into the transport. I can get that idler tire replaced. So you just keep working your way in is what it amounts to. You just keep working your way into where you've got to go. So I'm getting closer to completion just by getting this thing apart to this point. So now I can replace the idler tire. This is almost for sure the original one. On the idler tire, it is spring loaded, so if you pop that and not hold your finger over it, it's going to go flying across the room. Anyway, my point is be aware there's many small parts, and you just gotta, before you do anything, think about what you're doing. I've got the new idler tire installed. Most likely this will be in there another 30 years. I've got that back in, and you'll also find there's a number of points where you should clean up the old grease that's in the unit and apply new grease. It's pretty easy to tell where that is because you'll see this yellowing goop. There's not a whole lot of points in here, and you don't need a whole lot of it, but just take a look at the plastic pieces, and that's the best way, and you can tell where they had applied grease and where you need to clean it up and apply a little bit of new. The Nakamichi Dragon has an Azimuth unit that also has a belt that I'm going to replace. Again, it's 30 years old, not just a capstan belt, but this unit, the Azimuth unit, needs to be replaced. This is one of the reasons why the Nakamichi Dragon can play back tape so well and kind of adjust on the fly. You can pop the shaft just enough to get the old belt off and the new belt on. You've got to be careful. This is a plastic housing. You don't take your channel locks and bend it. You've got to go very slow with this, and you can just pop that shaft out enough to get that old belt off and get that new belt on. Now I've got the transport back together. I just repeated in reverse what I did to get it all apart. I'll take one final look. You know, a lot of these wires, you got to be careful you didn't get them caught under a screw, that they're routed back correctly. So I've got the transport back together, and I've reinstalled the transport back into the chassis, and I've put everything back together again. And what I'll do now on the test bench is kind of do the same thing I did when I started out. Let's make sure that the transport's quiet. Let's make sure you can play and you can record and you can fast forward and rewind before we go on here. So I've done that. Now I'm going to take some measurements on the test bench. Now it's time to, anytime you do work, especially on a unit like this, you really need to have some equipment to test it out. You change the belts and you say, well, it works. Maybe it does, but to your ears, the best way to really check out a repair and restoration is to have test equipment. The Nakamichi Dragon just has some outstanding specifications, and we're going to take a look and see how close we can come to the factory specs. I have some equipment. We'll test most of the specs that are in the back of your manual. First of all, I take a whoa and flutter meter, just see where we're at. This will tell me if the tape path is, for the most part, handling the tape well. In this case, it looks like it did, so that made me feel like, well, I got the transport back together probably correctly, because the whoa and flutter was extremely low, way under the spec. What you have to do also is have a known starting point with any tape deck, and the Nakamichi Dragon is no exception. I have some alignment tapes. They weren't made by Nakamichi, but they were made by a company that services Nakamichis. Sure, the original tapes would be great, but they're not available, so I will use some alignment tapes, and this gives me a known starting point. I'll be using a Sound Technology ST10A, which was a tape recorder test system that was used back in the 1980s to test open reel decks and cassette decks. I'll be testing 3 different cassette tape types after they've been calibrated in the Nakamichi Dragon and then tested by the ST1510A. Got 3 different tapes. Here's one of them. It's the Type 1. Our Type 2 is a TDK SA90, and our metal tape is going to be a Fuji Metal Z. So we're going to use these 3 tapes, 3 different formulas. Okay, first of all, I'm going to calibrate all 3 of the tapes, the Type 1, the Type 2, and the metal tape in the Nakamichi Dragon. So I'll start with the Type 1. I'm going to stick the Type 1 in the Dragon. I need to, this is let's see, what are we on? Alright, I need to push the EX button on the Dragon. I need to change the EQ to 120. I need to turn the Dolby off. And I think we got everything ready to calibrate. Okay, that's good. Now we can hit this reset button up here, and this will calibrate the deck the best it can for this particular tape. So I'm going to hit reset. The Dragon automatically goes back and rewinds the tape, and that one ought to be ready to go. So we'll go to the next one. Okay, next we've got a TDK SA90, which is a Type 2 cassette. Put him in here. We've got to change the EQ. And on the Dragon, we've got to change also to SX. We will call that good. And then I'll hit the 15 kilohertz button up here. And you can see the knobs to adjust lit up there. So we'll hit the reset here and then go to the next tape. For our metal tape, we're going to use a Fuji. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the Dragon. We need to go down and push the ZX button. We'll do the same thing again. And we got it at the calibration level. We've got our tapes all calibrated in the Dragon. And now it's time to do some testing. And now we're going to use a piece of test equipment from the early 1980s. It's called a Sound Technology 1510A. And these were state-of-the-art back in the day, testing tape decks like this Dragon. And we're going to start off with the Sony 90-minute Type 1 cassette. See what kind of frequency response we can get out of it. So here we go. This will certainly go plus or minus 3 dB all the way out to 17.5 kilohertz. That's not bad, you know, for a Type 1 tape. Pretty happy with that run, and that would give you a decent recording. Now it's the Type 2, the TDK SA90's turn. This tape's got a little bit more high frequency extension to it than the Type 1. Okay, now it's the Fuji metal tape's turn. This kind of tells you that this tape will easily go out to 20,000 hertz, pretty darn flat. As many of you know, all this equipment is mine. I don't box it back up and send it back to its owner because I'm its owner. So now it's time for it to do what it was designed to do, is make music. And I find the troubleshooting part of it and the repair part and the testing part very interesting, but I also love the musical part of it. Now it's time to take those tests that I did on the tapes and let's play some music on them. Let's do some tests with those, and then once I get done with that, I'm done with a piece of equipment, and now I put it in my system. I know it's operating properly, and I can use it for years and have it be, for the most part, carefree, other than to clean the heads like on a tape deck. I'm going to go ahead and do some tests now on that Type 1, Type 2, and that metal tape. Let's just see how this Dragon sounds, not just on the test bench, going through a bunch of frequency steps, but actually with music. So let's get started with that. Well, I did some testing. The biggest surprise was the Type 1. The Type 1, I was sitting here and I'm telling you, I would have to listen a while to pick out which was which. It was that good. And that was the Type 1. So I won't go on too much about the Type 2 and the metal tape because they were just as outstanding too. But frankly, I couldn't tell the Type 1 from the Type 2 from the metal. I mean, it was really that good. There are many other cassette formulas that I didn't touch on, but doing a Type 1, a Type 2, and a metal tape, you know, that covers a lot of ground. And most of the other formulas are somewhere in the middle of those. I was, as I said, really surprised with the Type 1. But, you know, when you look at it, if you remember back in the video, when I was doing the testing with the Sound Technology 1510A, it was, you know, still getting out there to 17 or 18,000 hertz. Which is pretty darn good that a Type 1 tape can make a first-class recording as long as it's biased correctly. And with the Nakamichi Dragon had the advantage of calibrating that particular tape formula for the Dragon, for that particular tape deck. So truly that is an advantage. The Type 2 got out, you know, to 20,000 hertz, and the metal tape got out there too. So, and both of those, you know, performed outstanding too. They all can do an excellent job, make recordings that are very, very close to the source. The Nakamichi Dragon is a great example of a manufacturer's hype of a product that actually carried through into the product they delivered to the consumer. It was an expensive cassette deck, no doubt about it. It was top dollar, top end, not just anybody had one. And like so many manufacturers, they came out with brochures that told you how great something was and a new feature and what it's going to do for you. And a lot of times these claims aren't carried through in the end product. But in the Dragon's case, it certainly is. And my testing of it and use of it just shows what a great piece of equipment this is. You can take any tape formula and get an excellent result from the record or the playback side. What more can you ask for from a cassette deck? This is really the pinnacle of cassette performance. There may be other decks that can compete with it one way or another, but there's nobody that can beat the Dragon overall performance. As great as the Nakamichi Dragon was, time moved on. And it moved on beyond the analog world. The digital world came along, and Nakamichi started to get into digital products. And now I'm going to cover the Nakamichi 1000 line that they started to produce in 1988. Their digital products were excellent and in many ways as amazing as the Dragon was. But it didn't turn out well in the end for Nakamichi. But that doesn't mean these three products here are not a coveted part of my collection. As the Dragon would be very difficult for me to sell, so would these Nakamichi digital products that I own. What I also have in my collection are the two remotes that came for the 1000 digital series, which is a remote for the 1000R DAT deck, and the other remote is for the 1000 MB CD changer. And these remotes are huge. They're about a foot long, they're about 5 inches wide, and they weigh several pounds. So you're not going to lose this remote in your couch. First, I'm going to talk about the 1000p digital processor, which pretty much is at the center of this entire system, because without it, neither the DAT deck or the CD changer would operate, because neither the DAT deck nor the CD changer has any type of digital to analog conversion built into them. So that's the 1000p's job, is to take that digital signal from both of those units and convert it to an analog signal, and then to send it out your RCA outputs to your stereo so you can listen to it. This processor can accept up to 3 digital inputs. It has an output level control as well as a fixed output. Either one, you can use either one you'd like to. The 1000p, it features a modular design. They're all boards, they're plug-in boards. The idea was to kind of keep up with the times, right? I mean, you were hoping that a year or two down the road, as technology changed, you just change a board out and keep on going. The construction is amazing. It just is. That's all I can say. It's this thick brushed aluminum. It's more than a 1/4 inch thick. Internally, it's solid copper and copper plating. It's just unbelievable the amount of detail they went into. Price was no object with this unit, and that's why it was $5,100, this one unit, not the whole set. It was $5,100 for the 1000p, and it does you no good unless you buy the other two. It's incredible how expensive this was, but really, if you take a look at it and look at the quality and the craftsmanship that went into it, it's unbelievable. I'm glad I own them, even if they didn't work. I'd love to own them, just to have them sit there. They're just incredibly beautiful pieces of equipment. And this is back in the late 80s, and even today, there's nothing built like them. If there is, it's going to run you tens of thousands of dollars. I spoke of the modular design of this unit, and this is a picture of the back panel, and you can see there's 6 screws. There's 2 screws per board, and you just undo those 2 screws, and those boards will pull right straight out of the back. You don't have to do any disassembly of the case or anything. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the analog to digital capabilities of this unit. I've been talking about the digital to analog because I have the 1000 DAT and the 1000 MB CD player that use the digital to analog circuitry in this unit, but it also has an analog to digital converter. So let's say you wanted to hook that Dragon up and make some tapes on your DAT deck. It has that. If you look, the top board in this unit is the analog to digital converter. The middle board is the digital to analog converter, and that bottom board is the digital interface to your digital equipment, like my DAT deck or my CD player, and it'll actually you can hook 3 different digital devices up to it. So I just wanted to show you that and not forget about the analog to digital side of it. I don't do too much recording from my analog stuff to this, but it does have that capability, and it was certainly important back 30 years ago that it could do that. I found no issues with the 1000p on the test bench, so I moved on to the 1000R DAT deck and the 1000 MB CD changer. And those 2 units, I wish I could say the same. I certainly ran into some issues with those. So let's start with the DAT deck, and let me tell you how that went. Here's a magazine cover for Stereophile from November of 1989. Nakamichi's $11,000 DAT recorder. Wow. That's all I can say. 1989. I mean, $11,000 here in the United States, that's a lot of money today. I mean, for most people anyway. It's just an unbelievable amount of money for a piece of stereo equipment. And they're talking here, when they say $11,000 DAT recorder, as I mentioned earlier, the 1000p, the digital analog converter, is part of this set. And then the DAT recorder, the 1000R, is the other piece. And as I mentioned earlier, the 1000p retailed for $5,900. The DAT deck was a very affordable $5,100. So that's where they come up with the $11,000 for the 2 pieces. In January of 1990, just a couple months after the review came out in Stereophile, the review came out in Stereo Review. I can remember always having a subscription to Stereo Review. You'd get one of those little cards. I don't know what it cost. It wasn't much. You know, you fill it out and get it for 80% off or something, and they'd start coming in the mail to you. So I always had Stereo Review. And once again, I'll just repeat myself like I do, I guess, pretty often. I just love the way they go through and they test these pieces of equipment. They do measurements on them. I mean, a lot of the stuff they talk about, I don't understand it. I didn't understand it then. Heck, I don't understand it now. And I, again, just want to bring up World Radio History, the website I talk about occasionally. That's where I find almost all of my magazine information at. That's where I got this information about this Nakamichi equipment. I think it's just a wonderful resource, and any of you guys, you don't need to own what I own. Any of your equipment has probably been reviewed in one of the magazines through the years. I just recommend that you go over there to worldradiohistory.com and just check it out, because it's a great resource for anybody who's into electronics of any type, actually. The new equipment just doesn't have these type of reviews very much anymore. There's a few out there, but most of the time they just send the new equipment to somebody in a flat in Boston, and they just hook it up and tell you what it sounded like to them. And there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong. But back in the day, they really went through and they did measurements, and they certainly did a lot of listening also, but they went through and told you all about the piece of equipment. And mostly you can figure the guy at Stereophile didn't know all this stuff. Nakamichi sent all the paperwork about this piece of equipment because they wanted, hopefully, for Stereophile to write it up well and for somebody to go buy it. All three of these units are just built incredibly well. This DAT deck is built just as well as the 1000p that you saw before and the 1000 MB changer that you're going to see later. Just incredible build quality. Each of them weigh 35-40 pounds a piece. All you've got to do is pick one of these up to understand how well they're built. They're beautiful too. They really are beautiful pieces. And in today's world, this DAT deck, this would be top-end stuff. This would be the high-end's high-end if anything was built like this. And frankly, maybe you guys out there know if there's anything built like this anymore, period, at any price. As I said, this is a beautiful piece of equipment, and I'd enjoy it even if it were broken, just to look at it and just to have it in my collection. But fortunately, this one now operates. It did not operate when I received it, and it was quite a challenge for me to repair this one. So today I get to enjoy it. I get to use it. Every time I turn it on, I'm so glad that it is functioning properly. But it took quite a bit of time for me to repair this. So what I'd like to do now is start and show you the repair and the restoration of this Nakamichi 1000 DAT deck. This one needs some repairs. Put a tape in it, seemed to load up okay, and but you had a lot of distortion in the playback. I did notice if you played with the fast forward, the rewind, just hit the buttons real quick, play, stop. The distortion would at times almost go away, at other times it'd be real bad. So that kind of gave me a clue that maybe there's something to do with the tape path. Stop it and move the tape a little bit and it'd work, kind of, and then it'd get worse. So anyway, it kind of gave me a little clue before I got started what I might be getting into. I've removed the top covers and the bottom covers just to take a look. Just what am I getting into here? One thing I noticed, like the power supply sits at the bottom, and like all the assemblies, it has a modular plug-in connectors. They're used throughout, so really, to get this stuff in and out, it's pretty simple. This, I think, had 6 screws, and just pull the connectors and out she'll come. As I said, I had this distortion issue. The rest of the deck, it seemed to fast forward and rewind somewhat, and I could put it into record mode and then playback mode. So, but anyway, I took the faceplate off just so I could get a better look at the drive unit. And so that's what I've done here. You can load a tape and actually see how it's loading. So you just, it's right there in your face. It's impossible to see this with the faceplate on and the thing together, but this might help me figure out what's going on here. Thought I might have had more of an issue than just dirty tape path, but this deck, like every other, first thing you do is just clean up the tape path. I mean, you do that and you've got a good chance of a deck working. And in this case, that didn't help, but I still needed to do it. I removed the entire drive, out of the unit. Again, this was pretty easy. I think there was 4 screws holding the drive unit. Then there were the modular connector cables, and those just pulled right off the various boards in the unit, and that wasn't a big deal. Just so I could take a closer look at it. Like always, like any equipment though, before you start removing cables out of anything, take a picture. Great in the digital world that you can take thousands of them and doesn't cost you a dime. And if there's some question down the road how these things go back together, you've got a picture. While I was in there, I did notice there was an assembly that was attached to the drive unit itself. It had some electrolytic capacitors on it, and I didn't really think this was going to fix it, but if I ever got this thing going, I wasn't going to take it back apart to do that. So there were, I don't know what there were, 8 maybe, something like that, electrolytics on it, and I think there might have been 3, maybe 5 electrolytics and 3 nonpolars. Anyway, while I had it apart, I thought, why not take a few minutes and really a couple dollars, and why not change them out? I mean, they're still 30 years old, and I didn't think this was going to fix my problem, but why not do it while I was in there? And of course, I did put it back together and still had the distortion problem. But anyway, like I said, it was worth a few minutes and a couple bucks. The RF assembly, I took that off. I didn't know what I was going to do if it was the RF assembly, because I didn't have I wish I'd worked in the factory and I could just borrow another one out of the bin. But I took it off to take a look at it to see if I could just see anything obvious. I didn't. But again, it was a couple screws, a couple cables, and right out it came. One thing I could not find for this unit, which I can't say about any other unit, I could not find a service manual anywhere on the internet for this. I didn't care if I had to pay for it. I didn't care what the deal was, but there's so few of these made. I'm sure there's some in the world, and if anybody's listening to this that has a service manual for a Nakamichi DAT unit, please contact me, and I'd be willing to pay you for a copy, or pay you if you email me a copy of it, because without a service manual, it makes it very difficult to work on any piece of equipment. What I ended up doing was setting up a small table in front of my workbench so I could hook the faceplate up, so I could use all the controls and get a better look again at what the drive unit was doing with the tape. As I said, I thought I had some sort of a tape issue, more so than an electronic issue. I mean, I wasn't really sure of that, but just the way it was acting. So, I could, with the faceplate on there and extend it out, I could, load and unload the tape, hit the play button, rewind, and just see what the tape was doing. What I noticed was, working, I've only worked on a few DAT decks. I've never, these are similar to VCRs. I've never been big into VCRs, so I didn't work much on them, but I have worked on a pretty good number of cassette and open reel decks. And just by watching the tape and the way it was acting, it just appeared the tape tension was questionable, at least in my mind. It just didn't handle between the modes. Sometimes it looks like you had a little slack, and on these things, it don't take much. If you can see it, if I can see something that's questionable with my eyeball, it's probably an issue. I took a good look at the tape path. I couldn't see anything obvious. As I said, I cleaned it up real well. I took off the pinch roller. Once again, take it off, clean it up, tried to make everything as new to make sure it wasn't some sort of a tape path issue. And just from lack of having, crap on it. So I cleaned it up as well as I could. And of course, put everything back together. And again, I still had the distortion. But as I said, after I didn't have the service manual, and you really shouldn't work on stuff if you don't have a service manual, but I couldn't find one. So, it wasn't the best option to just
fumble around with this thing blindly, but it was my only option for this deck. So after just from experience with other decks, I could tell something was up with what I thought was the tape tension. Something was up with it. And what I ended up doing, and then again, these things are it's so critical. It's nuts to really be in here without the proper calibration tape and, using the proper equipment to do this. But what I ended up doing was adjusting the back tension adjustment screw just slightly. And again, over time, these things over 30 years, loading, unloading, playing, fast forwarding, it don't take much. And so about a half a turn, I tightened up just the back tension adjustment screw just a hair. Well, what do you know? The thing actually would play without distortion. And this was a tape, of course, not recorded on this machine. It was my other DAT deck. And so I did a little bit of experimenting like any tape deck. One of the big things, again, this isn't, you should use the proper service manual, the proper calibration tape, and the proper equipment to set any tape deck up. But I did do some recording on this DAT. I also have another DAT. I have a Fostex D15. I did some recording on this deck, and I played it back on the Nakamichi, and it sounded good. But then I went over to the Fostex, which also has an error counter. This DAT, the Nakamichi doesn't, but the Fostex does. And really, it played as well with as few errors as one of the tapes that were taped off my Fostex D15. So, and also, as I said, I'd played some that were recording on that in the Nakamichi, and they all sounded really good. So I think I got the back tension pretty close. Is it the way I like to do things? No. But again, in this deck's case, I just had no other choice.
So you've seen my Nakamichi 1000 DAT deck and my 1000P processor. Just those two make an impressive team. Amazing pieces of equipment, but there's still one more to go, and that's the 1000 MB CD changer. Just as incredible as the other two pieces of equipment. So let me tell you a little bit about the Nakamichi 1000 MB CD changer. 3 years after Nakamichi released the 1000 DAT deck and the 1000P processor, they came out with the 1000 MB CD transport. Its retail price was just as impressive as the other two units in this line, and it retailed for $6,000. For my research, there were only about 30 dealers for this equipment, so that's one reason why it was pretty rare. The story with this deck is its isolation from vibration. And this has been around. The idea of isolating a CD from vibration has been around since the beginning of the CD format. It isolates the disc from acoustic energy generated by your speakers. There's also a very thick airtight door on the front panel that hermetically seals the disc playing chamber. Now, does all this stuff make a difference? I don't know. But Nakamichi called it the acoustic isolation system. A lot like, I think of this a lot like interconnect cables. Some people use interconnect cables that are $1 a foot. Some people use interconnect cables that are $1,000 a foot. Is there a difference? Same with speaker wiring. Some people spend thousands of dollars on their speaker wiring, and other people use lamp cord off a spool from Home Depot. Is there a difference? Well, there's a difference if you hear the difference, in my opinion. That's what I always think. You just don't, you listen to your ears. That's the whole key. Doesn't matter if it's real, doesn't matter if it's fake, doesn't matter. If you think something sounds good, then it works, no matter what. Like the other two units in the 1000 line, it's just gorgeous. And it's beautiful. The chassis, the push buttons, everything is made of aluminum. the craftsmanship and attention to detail is really quite amazing. And so it really has all three pieces really have a high-end look to them. They just have, you take a look at them and you think they're something special because they are. They just have such a high quality look to them and a high quality feel to them also. I guess I'm a Nakamichi digital fanboy here. They're just amazing. They're just amazing pieces of equipment. The 1000 MB has a 7-disc playback capability. You can play 1 disc at a time. You just open it, you put the disc on the tray, you put it in, you press the play button, and off you go. If you'd like to store the discs, you can store up to 6 discs in the 1000 MB, and a 7th one is the one that would be on the drawer tray. There's LEDs on the front that tell you how many discs are loaded and whether it's you have a single disc or if you have multiple discs. Before I show you the repair of my 1000 MB, I want to mention that there was a review for this unit in Stereophile in June of 1992. And again, a very extensive review, things you don't see in today's world. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, please take a look at it. And it's interesting thinking about Stereophile, and this is how I compared them to like Stereo Review. The reviewer talks several paragraphs about the difference in the sound quality of this 1000 MB with that door open or closed. They talk about the treble and the bass and the detail just with that door either being opened or closed. And I recall that with Stereophile, they were much more detailed about what they were hearing than maybe Stereo Review was. And I'm not complaining. I'm just glad that they were doing that back in the day, because in today's world, as I mentioned, you just don't see many reviews. You just see somebody having it hooked up in their home and they're testing it, and a company sent them the equipment and they just tell you kind of what it sounds like. So these people really went to the nth degree to give you every detail of what they were hearing or what they were measuring on a piece of equipment. So if you guys are interested in that, please take a look at Stereophile, the June 1992 edition. So now let me show you the repair of this 1000 MB. When I first put the 1000 MB up on the test bench, I took a look at it like I do with all the vintage equipment that I receive. And right off the bat, I could see the eject load button as well as the power button were misaligned and kind of loose. I could just see the misalignment with my eyes, and then when I touched it, it didn't feel quite right. So, like I always do though, I removed the top cover and just took a look at the unit, making sure I was going to get no surprises. Did the same with the bottom. Took the bottom cover off just to take a look. On this one, to get to the eject load and power switch buttons, I was going to have to take off a side cover also. So I went ahead and did that. This picture shows the unit on its side. And when I took the cover off and I was able to get to where the eject and the power buttons are, in this picture I'm pulling this little board out a little bit with my thumb and finger. There was adhesive there's some glue that had broke loose from this little plastic plate here that's just, you can see a little bit of space there to the aluminum case. And so I just put a little bit of adhesive back in there. I put it back in and it was perfect, solid as a rock. Just over the years, or got jarred or whatever, I just put the adhesive on it and put it right back in, and everything was fine. So what I did, I reinstalled the side panel cover after I repaired that. I wasn't going to need to get in there, I didn't think, so I put that back on, and the buttons now, they felt secure and they were nice and straight, so I felt that was all fixed. So I moved on and I powered it up. I had the top cover off, but I went ahead and I powered it up, and it powered up fine. And I just did a little bit of testing with it.
As I mentioned earlier, it's a 7-disc changer, so you get a pretty good view of it here. With the top off, you can see how it actually operates. And as I mentioned before, also, the 1000 MB comes with a remote control. Now, I show a picture here. It's sitting on the top. When the top cover was on it, it's sitting there. Look at the width of that thing. It's big. You know, it's a big remote. It's not tiny. And this remote only controlled one unit, and it's the Nakamichi 1000 MB. So everything was good. I put it back together. There was no issues. You know, it tested fine on the test bench. I put some CDs in it and seemed to work fine, would change between discs fine. So I put it all back together. You know, I was done with her for now.
Well, there you have it, my 1000 MB restoration. Didn't take too much to get it going, but like so many older pieces of equipment, there's usually something. So that's all three of the digital products we went through, the 1000p, the 1000 DAT deck, and the 1000 MB CD player. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all together. I'm going to hook them all up and put them in my system and listen to them for a while.
The sound of these three units is outstanding. Using the system together, it sounds great. The DAT deck works great. As I mentioned earlier, I have another DAT deck, a Fostex, and with an error counter in it. And the tapes, you can't tell. You can't tell which deck made them, which deck recorded them, or which deck is playing them back. They sound identical. The CD changer, it works great, and it's a pretty complicated one at that, but it works very, very well. The 1000p, it sounds great. It works great. Now, in today's world, a single chip would have the power of this entire unit. But that's technology. And is it up to snuff with today's technology? Maybe not. It really does sound good. The entire group of components look great. They're built forever, and they sound good. And when operating properly, like these are, they can stay. They're not gonna, they're not gonna compete with anything modern in the modern digital world. These three units. But they are just so cool, and they're so fun to play with. And I'll say it one more time. The build quality is spectacular. You'd be real hard-pressed to find any consumer piece of equipment that's built like this.
As some of you know, I have a pretty extensive collection of vintage audio equipment, and I move it in from time to time and listen to it. A lot of times I'll do a YouTube video. It's a great time for me to move equipment in and to listen to it. So I thought I'd show you another area where I listen to some of the equipment. And on this rack right now, you can see the Nakamichi Dragon and the Nakamichi 1000 line that this video is about. But also on this rack is the Sansui BA5000 that I just did a video on, a Pioneer SX 1980, several other pieces of equipment. And what I do from time to time, I'll move pieces in and out on this rack. So I'll be listening to these digital products for a while. I don't know, I don't really have a schedule exactly. They might be up there a few weeks. They could even be up there a few months. And then I'll move something else in and I'll listen to it. So I just thought I'd show you a different area than what you're usually seeing. This room has pretty good acoustics. I've had things set up in a lot of different ways here, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of you guys who are into this, into audio, you don't have to be into vintage audio, but any kind of audio, rooms are funny. You can start with the way it's supposed to be set up, and you end up something different because we all have different ears, our rooms are all different. It just takes some experimenting. I just thought y'all might be interested in just seeing another listening area that I use. It's hard not to be impressed by Nakamichi. What incredible products they made back in the day. It's just a shame they went bankrupt in the early 2000s. It just happens. Look what happened with Sears and Amazon. You'd never think Sears would be gone. some guy in his garage in Seattle put Sears out of business, right? So times change, and you had to change with them. And Nakamichi just couldn't do it. You look back at the equipment we just went through in this video. Look at that Dragon. And it started way before then, as I showed in the video. I mean, Nakamichi, they're just incredible when they came out with a Nakamichi 1000 cassette deck, and that started them going as far as the audio world was concerned, and they didn't look back until the 1990s. All four of these pieces just show what a tremendous company Nakamichi was. And there's so many others. As I said, you could do a video on at least a dozen more of their products that were just as remarkable. I hope you enjoyed this video on 4 iconic Nakamichi products, each one amazing in its own right. And if you did, I'd appreciate a big thumbs up down below. For you non-subscribers, I'd really appreciate a subscription if you'd like to see more videos like this. And to my present subscribers, thank you for hanging in there. Y'all have a good day.